Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode is a recording of the Teagasc National Beef Conference panel discussion titled Delivering Sustainability at Farm Level, which took place on the 13th of December in the Shearwater Hotel, Ballinasloe. It was facilitated by Matt O'Keefe from the Irish Farmers Monthly, and the panel participants were Professor Sinead Waters, Dr. Dominika Krol from Teagasc, Ross Evans from ICBF, and Pearse Kelly, Teagasc Head of Drystock. It first began with Professor Sinead Waters discussing her current research and the potential for feed additives to reduce methane emissions.
First of all, I was interested in the rumen microbiome, so microbes that exist in the rumen of the animal. And that really extended then into these microbes produce methane. So really right now I'm interested in methane emissions from ruminants, how we can reduce methane emissions from ruminants, developing methane mitigation strategies that we can ultimately bring to the farm level. So strategies and technologies that we can develop further and bring to the farm level. So at the moment we're developing these in the lab. And also we're testing technologies in beef cattle in Teagasc Grange and in sheep in Athenry also. And really what we want to do is make them implementable on farms. We work closely also with the Signpost programme, as was mentioned earlier, so that we can make these technologies go from the lab to trials and then to be utilised on the farm.
And in terms of methane reduction additives, I assume this is a worldwide research project, that there's huge interaction between the Irish effort and globally.
Absolutely. And I suppose in another role that I have, I'm co-chair of the Livestock Research Group of the Global Research Alliance for Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. And really in that forum I bring issues that are of Irish importance, particularly we're a pasture-based country, similar to New Zealand for example. So really what we want to do is, internationally there's loads of research going on in trying to come up with the same, endpoint in developing feed additives that we can apply at farm level. And over the last year really in Teagasc Grange we've made lots of progress. We have increased our capacity to measure methane, first of all, hugely, both in Teagasc Grange and in Tully with the ICBF. So we can actually measure methane now very well in beef cattle. So we're actually trying to get proper baselines for that, and that's really good progress. What we're also doing is we have a large project called Methadate, which I lead, and in that project we're testing, lots of companies and organisations make claims about feed additives. Within this project we're independently assessing these feed additives from the laboratory right through to animal trials. So we can give definitive results to the scientists, to farmers, to everybody on whether feed additives work or not. We've tested things like Urea that you may hear about, or 3-NOP. We've tested other feed additives from companies in Ireland and elsewhere, and we're making progress. The area where we really want to push out at the moment is trying to make these feed additives applicable in pasture-based. So really, as mentioned earlier, our ability to grow grass in Ireland and to use pasture as part of our feeding system is our advantage here in Ireland. So any feed additive that's going to be applicable here in Ireland will have to be able to apply it during grazing systems. And that's where a lot of the work is going on at the minute. Progress we've made, we've tested 3-NOP, Urea, that has reduced methane emissions indoors for us by 30%. So that has been tested around the world. This was the first trial that was carried out on the island of Ireland, and that was very, very successful. But this is essentially a powder that needs to be mixed into a TMR diet. So really, and you cannot really get it into a pellet in the current format. So we're looking at this additive and other feed additives, trying to get them into a concentrate or a nut that you can actually deliver it on farm. And we're making progress. There's certain feed additives from Irish industry partners where we can, using an additive called calcium peroxide type feed additive, which has given us similar results. And we can actually get it into a nut and deliver that quite easily on farm. So we're pushing that out in a minute.
Okay, we'll delve into that further over the next half an hour. You mentioned interaction with ICBF and Tully, brings me nicely on to the next panellist right beside me here. I'll have to tell you who he's not, first of all. For anyone that knows Andrew Cromie, that's definitely not Andrew Cromie. That's Ross Evans. He's an ICBF geneticist. I've practiced that since you told me what you were. And there's an awful lot of work going on in terms of how breeding can reduce emissions from the Irish herd, but on an economic basis. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and I suppose, look, there was a couple of comments from the audience about whether, you know, it's timely now that there's a revision of the Eurostar indexes, and I think it is that time. And I suppose, look, the last 6 years has been, you know, we saw the BDGP scheme, and, you know, there was a reluctance there then to change the goalpost until that scheme had finished. But there's a lot of initiatives coming forward, and I suppose one of the themes I picked up on today was, the first one was the age of slaughter piece, and how we're trying to make progress driving down the age of slaughter. Well, one of the key additions that we will see coming in later in the year is an age of slaughter breeding value coming in as a new component of the index. So that will start to reward the earlier finished animals that can get in on spec, and so that's kind of a key one. Both has an economic impact, but also a carbon impact. So if you can use that then to breed animals that will drive down the genetic merge for age of slaughter, but also the phenotypic level. The other initiatives that are coming, as Sinead mentioned, is the potential advent of a carbon index later in the year. So both the terminal index and the replacement index. As some of you might know, it was launched in November on the dairy side, and it'll be launched in January on the dairy beef side. But the Paul is working hard there on the revision of the economic values that are going into the terminal replacements, but also calculation of the carbon values that are going to identify the key traits that are driving carbon in the index. I suppose all that then can be validated by the data that's over in the Tully Research Centre. I suppose at this stage there's somewhere near close 1,300, 1,400 animals gone through, and worldwide it's probably the largest multi-breed data set that's gone through, and there's some really interesting data coming through from that. We can see big variation within breed and across breed, and the relationships there with traits like feed intake and live weight. They're all giving us an idea as to how methane is being produced on a typical finishing unit. What we need to do now is to replicate that at grass. So see how do those animals perform in terms of their methane emission at grass before they come into Tully, but then extend it to the cows, extend it to the suckler cow, which I suppose is the biggest carbon sink there in the sector. So I mean, we would see that, you know, that there are two big changes coming then in terms of the indexes for later in the summer next year. But the other one I was picking up on was a lot of discussion on age at first calving. And I suppose, look, it struck me that there's probably two traits already in the index there that we're not really utilising because they're probably not up front and central. And the two of them are, there is an actual trait there for age of first calving, but there's also a trait there for maternal calving difficulty. And we would have seen examples of those that were probably good and maybe the age of first calving, but then didn't have maternal calving difficulty and ended up leading to a lot of heifers being pulled after their first lactation. So there's probably, you know, something we can do there maybe to try and bring those traits up front and central for anyone that is thinking of making a drive for that 24 month at first calving.
Okay, Ross, just as an overarching comment from you perhaps, we know there are any number of heritable traits that can be pursued, but is there, to what extent are they achievable? What's the cut-off point where it's not worth pursuing it because you wouldn't get enough of a bang for your buck?
Well, I mean, if we look at the full range of traits that are in the replacement index, they'll range from a very heritable trait like feed intake and carcass weight at somewhere 40-50% heritable, down to a trait like female fertility, which might be 2 or 3%. And that's literally a function of how many animals you need to get a reliable proof. So if an animal has 100 carcass records, you get a quite high reliability there. You might need 2,000 female fertility records because the heritability is so low at 2%. But you will get reliable bulls once you have a lot of records on them. So it just means that you have to plan the breeding program so that when you're testing young sires that they get good coverage so that you get enough daughters coming through the system. Okay.
Dr. Dominika Krol, we haven't met earlier, you're a late arrival, all the way from Wexford.
all the way from Wexford, yes.
Delighted you could make it, absolutely.
Just as well I had a 4x4.
Yeah, things like that rough out there now. The Wexford people are always complaining about the weather. Listen, you have a range of analysis and research results. Take me through 2 or 3 of them.
Okay, so I think probably what's of interest and what you're alluding to is the MAC analysis. So kind of, what I call a benchmarking really of when we take a number of mitigation options that we've worked on collectively in Teagasc, be it in Johnson Castle where I'm based, our colleagues elsewhere, and these are measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that reduce ammonia emissions, and really, we take that all these component research and we put them together into an analysis which is really benchmarking. It's looking at, how much mitigation we can achieve with a certain measure, and what is the cost associated with it. So it really, that kind of higher level analysis identifies the measures with the highest potential. So kind of all the low hanging fruit that that can be maybe prioritised for farmers and for policymakers. These type of analysis also tell us that perhaps some measures are very good, but they need a little bit of a support on the financial side. So what we see is the kind of cost benefit analysis really of each measure, and there's a suite of measures there on both greenhouse gas and ammonia side. Some of them are the same, some of them differ a little bit. But really at the core of it is, there's a lot of measures that save farmers money, that they make financial sense on the farm. Things like, breeding better animals and improving health. So what we've heard already, this evening with regards to a lot of research, these are also mitigation measures that, that reduce our carbon footprint, that reduce our ammonia emissions. So other kind of our big things that that can be implemented are low emission slurry spreading, or taking up protected urea, changing that fertilizer formulation to low emission fertilizers. So there's a huge range, there's a range of mitigation measures there, and really what we've been working on, and what my research focused on over the last few years is one, that component research, specifically for myself on the nitrogen side, and nitrogen use efficiency, and measures associated with that, and then really bringing it a step further and kind of having that document that is then taken up by the industry, by policymakers, and it's really a guidance document for how to move forward with regards to more sustainable systems.
Protected urea and less low emission slurry spreading, I would suggest highly practical, highly economic, beneficial. They're on the positive side of the balance sheet. At this stage, at this early stage in Ireland, but a mature stage right across the globe, and particularly Europe, anaerobic digestion, where's that on the profit and loss?
That's an interesting one, because there's, as a measure, there's so much to it, because a lot of the measures that we look at is it's a component of the system, whereas AD, you can look at it as a number of components, or you can look at it at a system level. Okay, so we're talking about provision of feedstocks and sustainability of growing those feedstocks, which we're currently researching at the moment. Improving the kind of biomethane yields within the AD process, which we're also working on. Then there's a whole recycling of digestate, and again we're looking at emissions associated with it. And then there's there's a whole kind of provision for the industry in terms of where to grow feedstock, how to move it around, what's the transport options, how far from the plant it can be, what size of the plant. It's kind of is preferable, whether the plant produces biogas, biomethane that is then used, maybe in trucks or kind of injected into gas grid. So there's just AD is such an interesting and fascinating kind of fast-growing area at the moment. There's so many moving levers that it's very hard to kind of give a definite answer, which is probably not what you want to hear.
Well, I do want to get into, not immediately, but I do want to get into the practicalities of where farmers can be involved, and we'll get some interaction on that. But I want to bring in our final panellists, first of all, Pearse Kelly. Pearse, research, development, adoption is the big issue, always has been across all the sectors. Where are we with the likes of the MAC curve initiatives?
Yeah, so you're 100% right, Matt. Sinead has talked about, and Ross and Dominika and our earlier speakers talked about all the different technologies that can be brought out that will help us reduce our emissions, and that's great. But there's an assumption in the MAC curve too that there'll be a big uptake of these technologies. So we really do need to get an uptake of these technologies, because it's one thing saying on paper that reducing the age of first calving has a significant impact and can reduce by X, Y, or Z. But if we're only at 24% of the national herd calving down of heifers calving the first calving at 23 to 26 months, we need to significantly ramp that up. And it was really interesting, I think, the figures Paul put up there, that the impact of moving 50,000 heifers from 36 to 24, and it's those kind of seismic shifts that we're going to have to see in the next 5 to 6 years if to achieve the target that the director was talking about earlier on of 25%. But there is movement, and then we even take and the director was talking earlier on about the National Farm Survey results, and part of the National Farm Survey results for the last number of years is looking at the uptake of technologies. And if we look at, say, even what Dominika was talking about there on the Drystock sector alone, so 25% of the slurry that's spread now on Drystock farms is from low emission slurry spreading. That's obviously a huge increase since 2015, when the technology wasn't really being spoken about. If we look at the 2021 figure for protected urea on Drystock farms, it's much higher than dairy farms where there's a lot more urea spread per se anyway. But on Drystock farms the figure was 2%. Okay, but that was 2021. I would argue that it's really only probably in the last 12 to 18 months that we as an organisation and farmers and the print media and everybody has started to talk about, and the availability of protected urea is a big thing. So I suspect when we see the 2022 figures that 2% will be a lot higher. Then the other big one that we're seeing, and there hasn't been a huge amount of talk about it here this evening, but liming is a big one that has kind of huge influence. So if you look at things like protected urea, we'll probably have a much bigger influence and a much bigger impact when it's uptake on dairy farms, where there's an awful lot higher use of nitrogen, whereas on Drystock farms, a lot of people here in the audience are maybe only putting out 50, 60 units of nitrogen per acre, or 50, 60, 70 kilos per hectare in the year. So there's not going to be a huge, massive benefit on the say protected urea, the impact on Drystock farms. But where there would be a big impact is the greater use of, say, lime, because you can have a significant more grass growing, obviously, with all the benefits of putting out lime and much better nutrient use efficiency. And we see from the National Farm Survey again that in that 5-year period we have seen an increase from, I think it was 15 to 20% in the 5-year period of the use of lime. But again, it's still only 21% of farms putting out lime. And lime is something that it's not really something that you'd say is optional, like nitrogen, that you'll push grass production, I'll put out nitrogen or I won't put out nitrogen. Lime is something that we're told that as rain comes, it washes basically makes soil more acidic. So the vast majority of farms do need to put out lime. It's not something that the 80% who don't put it out have decided that their farm doesn't need it. And we've seen, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, I think the figure we were putting out, and I'm open to correction on this, I think we're putting out close to 2 million tonnes of lime, whereas we were back there for a long time at 1 million tonnes. So our soils haven't changed since the 60s. If anything, we need more lime. We should be getting closer to that 2 million tonnes. So it's impacts like that we need to see start to happen at farm level if the improvements that Dominika is talking about and the mitigation factors that the MAC curve has shown us can get us. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to get to that 25%.
Okay. Let's just pick out protected urea as an instance where you can get a big hit. It's practical, assuming there's availability, assuming it's price competitive. Bang can.
Yeah, that's been said. Listen, that's a policy issue. That's not something that Teagasc is going to necessarily take a stance on. But I mean, I don't know that we need to go that far even, Matt. You know, I mean, I think what it is, and it's around nutrient management planning, and it's around, listen, call a spade a spade. There's a fear on a lot of Drystock farms over the years that urea wasn't as good as can. And there's absolutely no research. All the research has shown that they're exactly the same. So there's even that level of, you know, we talk about a fear of going on calf and heifers at 2 years instead of 3 years. There was a fear all along of moving from can to ordinary urea, and now we're asking Drystock farmers to take a little bit more of a leap of faith. Don't just jump to urea, jump to protected urea. So it's around education, it's around training, and it's around giving people the confidence. And I mean, that's where I suppose coming into the future beef and the dairy beef programme. I mean, you can ask any of them. There's plenty of participants here this evening who are in those programmes, and you know they have moved to that, and 100% will tell you, listen, they're growing every bit as much grass with the protected urea as they grew with their can-based products. But it's seeing is believing, Matt, and you know it's easy for us as research organisations or an advisory service to send out a fact sheet or tell you in a newsletter. But really, at the end of the day, for you to be convinced, you need to dip your toe in the water, put out some of it, see what happens, and convince yourself. And that's really what we're asking farmers to do on the technologies, whether it's protected urea or calf and heifers at 2 years of age. You know, some of the people on the calf and heifers at 2 years of age, it's very unusual for someone to go from 100% calf in 3 years to 100% calf in 2 years. But they might try 3 or 4 heifers and say, you know, you hear Shane there talking about, he's no calving difficulties. And that doesn't come around by accident. He's no calving difficulties because he's using AI and he's using easy calving bowls of a high reliability. So he's using the technology, but he's using his brains to implement it.
That's all for this week's episode. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates on our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.